The massive doors of the Galactic Confederation Council chamber opened with a deep rumble that shook the floor. Captain Ji-won Kim stepped inside, her black diplomatic uniform simple and plain. Around her, the chamber rose up like a giant bowl, filled with the strangest collection of beings she had ever seen. Every alien delegate wore weapons, lots of weapons. The Vorthak representatives sat in their section with plasma rifles strapped to their backs and energy pistols on their belts. Their 4 arms made it easy to carry multiple weapons at once. General Krex, their leader, had so many weapons attached to his armor that he looked more like a walking armory than a diplomat. The tall Zephyrians carried curved energy blades that glowed with blue light. Even sitting down, they towered over most other species. Their weapons were works of art, covered in detailed patterns that told stories of their battles. The Gornathi delegates looked like living weapons themselves. Their bodies were covered in natural armor plates, and sharp spikes grew from their shoulders and arms. They had grafted metal claws onto their hands and laser cannons into their forearms. Even the Melanites, who claimed to be peaceful, carried beautiful crystal launchers that could fire projectiles at incredible speeds. The crystals hummed softly, creating an eerie music that filled their section of the chamber. Ji-won walked to the center of the room where a small platform waited for her. Her footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Hundreds of alien eyes watched her every move. She carried no weapons, no armor, no ceremonial blade or energy shield, just a simple data pad and her diplomatic credentials. General Krex stood up, his weapons clanking against each other. His voice came through a translator device that made it sound like metal scraping against stone. "Human delegate," he said, his 4 eyes studying her carefully. "Where are your weapons of honor, your battle trophies, your ceremonial blade?" The chamber filled with clicking, buzzing, and growling sounds as other aliens voiced their agreement. They all spoke different languages, but the translation devices made it sound like an angry crowd. "How can we take you seriously?" asked the Zephyrian ambassador, her hand resting on her glowing sword. "Every civilized species shows their strength through their weapons. It is the foundation of respect." A Gornathi war chief laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "Look at this soft creature. She has no claws, no natural armor, no built-in weapons. What kind of pathetic species sends an unarmed weakling to represent them?" More laughter echoed through the chamber. The Melanite delegate shook his crystal launcher, making it sing a mocking tune. "Perhaps humans are too primitive to understand our ways," he said in a voice like wind chimes. Ji-won stood quietly in the center of it all, waiting for the noise to die down. She had expected this reaction. Every species in the Confederation had built their entire culture around the idea that strength came from weapons and the ability to destroy enemies. Back on Earth, Admiral Hunwoo Park watched the live feed from his command station orbiting the planet. His aide, Lieutenant Minho Choi, stood beside him looking worried. "Sir," Minho said, "maybe we made a mistake. Perhaps we should have sent someone from the military, someone with medals and combat experience." Hunwoo shook his head slowly. His weathered face showed no emotion, but his eyes never left the screen, showing Ji-won surrounded by hostile aliens. "No, Lieutenant. Captain Kim knows exactly what she is doing. We chose her for a reason." "But sir, they are laughing at her. At us. How can she negotiate with beings who do not respect her?" "Watch and learn," Hunwoo said quietly. In the council chamber, the laughter was finally ending. General Krex stepped forward, his massive form casting a shadow over Ji-won. "Human, you insult this council by coming here defenseless. You show weakness and expect us to treat you as an equal. This is not how civilized beings behave." Ji-won looked up at the towering alien general. Her voice was calm and clear when she spoke. "I do not need weapons." The chamber fell completely silent. Even the humming of the melanite crystals stopped. "What did she say?" whispered a Zephyrian delegate. "She said she does not need weapons," General Krex repeated, his translator making his voice sound confused. The silence lasted for several seconds. Then the laughter started again, louder than before. Aliens pointed at Ji-won and made sounds that needed no translation. They thought she was either crazy or stupid. General Krex raised one of his forearms for silence. Human delegate, you amuse us with your foolishness, but this is a serious council. We deal with matters of war and peace, territory and resources. These are not games for the weak. I understand the importance of this council, G1 replied. That is why I am here. To show you that there is a different way to solve problems, a better way. The Gornathi war chief stood up, his metal claws scraping against the floor. Better way? There is only one way to solve disputes. The strong take what they want from the weak. The well-armed defeat the defenseless. This is the natural order of the universe, is it? G1 asked simply. The question seemed to confuse several delegates. They looked at each other uncertainly. Of course it is, General Krex said, but he sounded less sure than before. Every species understands this basic truth. Power comes from superior weapons and the will to use them. G1 nodded as if she understood. Then you will not mind if I prove you wrong. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. The translation devices struggled to keep up with all the different languages being spoken at once. Prove us wrong? The Melanite delegate laughed, his crystals singing with amusement. Impossible. You have no weapons, no army, no way to force anyone to do anything. Exactly, G1 said with a small smile. General Krex studied her for a long moment. Despite his confusion, he was curious about what this strange human thought she could accomplish. Very well, human. We will give you one chance to demonstrate your foolish ideas. You have one full cycle to show us this better way you speak of, he gestured to a holographic display that appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed a section of space where two fleets of warships faced each other across a battlefield littered with debris. The Gornathi and the Kalarians have been fighting over mining rights in the Nexus system for 37 cycles. Hundreds of ships have been destroyed. Thousands of warriors have died. Neither side will yield. Our most advanced weapons and threats of greater force have failed to stop this conflict. The display zoomed in to show the details of the battle zone. Massive warships bristling with weapons circled each other like angry predators. If you can solve this dispute without weapons, without threats, without force of any kind, then perhaps we will listen to more of your strange human ideas. General Krex leaned forward, his weapons gleaming in the chamber's light. But when you fail, as you surely will, humanity will submit to Confederation rule. You will accept our guidance and learn proper civilized behavior. G1 looked at the display showing the endless battle between two species that refused to find peace. She had studied their conflict during her journey to the Confederation station. She knew their history, their motivations, their fears. I accept. Your challenge, she said simply. The alien delegates murmured among themselves. Some seemed excited to watch the human fail spectacularly. Others appeared genuinely curious about what she might try to do. As the council session ended and the delegates filed out, many of them cast looks back at the small human woman who claimed she could succeed where all their weapons had failed. G1 remained standing in the center of the chamber, studying the holographic battlefield. She already had a plan forming in her mind. It would not involve threats or superior firepower. It would require something the Confederation had never tried before. She would have to make enemies choose to become friends. 3 days after accepting the challenge, Ji-Won Kim stood on the bridge of a small diplomatic vessel heading toward the Nexus system. The ship was barely armed with basic shields and emergency systems. No weapons, no military escort, no backup, fleet waiting in hyperspace. Lieutenant Minho Choi piloted the vessel while constantly checking the sensor readings. Captain, I am detecting over 200 warships in the system. Kalarian forces control the northern sector, Gornathi forces hold the south. Both sides have been building up their fleets for months. Ji-Won studied the tactical display showing the positions of the enemy fleets. For 37 cycles, these two species had been locked in brutal combat over mining rights to rare crystals found only in this system. The crystals powered faster than light engines and were worth more than entire planets. Have either side responded to our diplomatic requests? She asked. Yes, Captain. Both commanders have agreed to meet with you separately, but their messages were not very polite. Minho brought up the communications log. Commander Daeho Lee of the Calarian forces had sent a short message. Come if you wish, human. But do not waste my time with weak words when only strong actions matter. The Gornathi response from War Chief Vexen was even less encouraging. Soft. Meat with no claws thinks it can end what warriors could not. We will speak with you before we crush the crystal thieves, if only for amusement. Dr. Soyoung Han, Earth's top expert on alien psychology, spoke from her monitoring station aboard a cloaked observation ship hidden at the edge of the system. Captain Kim, both species have built their entire identity around military strength. The Calarians believe that superior technology makes them worthy of victory. The Gornathi think that natural fighting ability gives them the right to take whatever they want. What about their common ground? Jiwan asked. That is the problem. Both sides see the conflict in terms of absolute victory or total defeat. Neither species has a cultural concept of compromise or shared benefit. They literally cannot imagine a solution where both sides win. Jiwan's ship entered the war zone, passing through debris fields where hundreds of vessels had been destroyed. Broken, hull pieces and dead crews drifted in the cold of space. The waste of life and resources was staggering. The first meeting took place aboard Commander Daeho Lee's flagship, a massive vessel shaped like a crystal formation. The ship's hull was integrated with living metal that could repair itself and grow new weapon systems. Every surface hummed with contained energy. Commander Lee waited in his war room, surrounded by holographic displays showing the positions of every ship in both fleets. His body was tall and thin, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow from within. Most impressive were his arms, which had been surgically modified to interface directly with his ship's weapon systems. He was literally connected to enough firepower to destroy small moons. Human diplomat, he said without looking up from his tactical displays. I agreed to this meeting out of curiosity. Your species is unknown to us. We wonder what kind of beings send unarmed representatives to negotiate between armed forces. Jiwan sat across from him at a metal table. We are the kind of beings who believe that understanding each other is more powerful than destroying each other. Commander Lee finally looked at her directly. His large eyes were the color of deep ocean water. Understanding? The Gornathi understand only violence and theft. They want our crystal mines because they lack the technology to find their own. They think that if they kill enough of my people, we will simply give up and let them steal what we have worked to build. Tell me about your people's work in these mines, Jiwan said. The request seemed to surprise Commander Lee. He had been expecting threats or demands. Our work? We have spent decades developing the technology to safely extract the crystals without damaging the delicate formations. It requires precise equipment and years of training. The Gornathi want to simply blast the crystals out with crude mining explosives. That sounds like it would destroy much of the resource, Jiwan observed. Exactly. They are too primitive to understand that brute force often destroys what you are trying to obtain. This is why they must be stopped. Jiwan spent 2 more hours listening to Commander Lee explain his people's advanced mining techniques, their scientific approach to crystal formation, and their careful environmental protection methods. She asked detailed questions about the technical challenges and the training required for safe operations. By the end of the meeting, Commander Lee was speaking with genuine enthusiasm about his people's achievements, rather than anger about their enemies. I will speak with the Gornathi commander tomorrow, Jiwan said as she prepared to leave. Waste of time, Commander Lee replied, but his voice lacked the harsh edge it had carried earlier. They understand only strength. The next day, Jiwan met with War Chief Vexen aboard his flagship, a vessel that looked like it had been grown, rather than built. The organic hull was covered in natural armor plating, and weapon ports opened and closed like breathing organs. The ship felt alive and dangerous. War Chief Vexen was exactly what Jiwan had expected from reading his psychological profile. Nearly 3 meters tall, covered in natural armor plates, with metal claws grafted onto his hands and small laser cannons built into his forearms, he was a living weapon bred for combat from birth. So, he growled when she entered his command chamber. The tiny human thinks she can solve what we could not solve with proper violence. Tell me, soft creature, what Weapons does your species use? What makes you think you can understand war? We do understand war, Jiwan replied calmly. We understand it well enough to know that it should always be the last choice, not the first. Vexen laughed, a sound like grinding stone. Last choice? War is the natural state of the universe. The strong take from the weak. The well-armed defeat. The defenseless. This is how resources are properly distributed. Is that why your people need these crystals? Jiwan asked. The question caught Vexen off guard. He had been expecting her to lecture him about peace or threaten him with consequences. Need them? Of course we need them. Our ships are fast and powerful, but they consume massive amounts of energy. The crystals from this system burn cleaner and last longer than any other fuel source in the galaxy. Your ships must be magnificent, Jiwan said with genuine interest. I have read about Gornathi engineering. You build vessels that can withstand incredible punishment and keep fighting. For the next 3 hours, Vexen found himself describing the proud history of Gornathi's ship design. Their vessels were built to last for centuries, passed down from generation to generation of warriors. Unlike other species who constantly built new ships, the Gornathi perfected their designs over time, creating vessels that became stronger and more efficient with age. Our ships are not just machines, Vexen explained, his voice filled with pride instead of anger. They are part of our families. My flagship belonged to my father, and his father before him. We improve them, but we never abandon them. That sounds like a very sustainable approach, Jiwan observed, much better than constantly building new fleets. As the meeting ended, Vexen seemed puzzled by his own behavior. He had intended to intimidate the human diplomat, but instead had spent hours talking about his people's engineering traditions. Back on her ship, Jiwan reviewed her notes from both meetings. Dr. Soyoung Han contacted her from the observation vessel. Fascinating approach, Captain. Instead of trying to get them to stop fighting, you got them talking about what they are proud of. Both commanders seemed much less hostile by the end of their meetings. Pride is not the same as hatred, Jiwan replied. Both species have legitimate needs and impressive achievements. The problem is not that they are enemies. The problem is that they have never tried to be anything else. What is your next step? Jiwan looked at the tactical display showing the I-2 fleets still facing each other across the battlefield. Tomorrow I'm going to ask them both for help with something neither side expected. Help with what? Jiwan smiled. A rescue mission. The emergency alert came at the worst possible moment. A Calarian mining vessel had suffered a catastrophic engine failure while operating near the contested crystal fields. The ship was drifting helplessly, its life support systems failing, with 47 crew members trapped inside. The vessel had been damaged when a stray Gornathi missile hit an asteroid, sending debris flying through space. One large piece had punched through the mining ship's hull, causing massive system failures. Lieutenant Minho Choi received the distress signal first. Captain Kim, we are getting an emergency transmission from the Calarian vessel Light of Knowledge. They are requesting immediate assistance. Jiwan studied the tactical display. The damaged ship was drifting in a dangerous area between the two battle fleets. Calarian rescue ships would have to cross through Gornathi weapons range to reach it. Gornathi vessels would face the same risk from Calarian defenses. Contact both fleet commanders, she ordered. Request immediate communication. Within minutes, both Commander Lee and War Chief Vexen appeared on her ship's communication screen. Their images were split, showing their mutual hostility even in this crisis. Human diplomat, Commander Lee said urgently, we need safe passage to rescue our people. The Gornathi must cease fire and allow our rescue ships through their territory. Absolutely not, Vexen growled immediately. We will not lower our defenses to help the enemy. This is a trick to get our ship positions. 47 people are going to die, Jiwan said calmly. Calarian people, Vexen replied. Not our concern. They should not have been mining in a war zone. Commander Lee's image flickered with anger. Your weapons caused this disaster. You are responsible for their deaths. Our weapons were aimed at your military vessels, not civilian miners. If they die, it is because you put non-combatants In danger. Jiwan watched the two commanders argue while precious time ticked away. The Kalarian crew had less than 6 hours of life support remaining. War Chief Vexen, she said, interrupting the argument. Are there any Gornathi vessels in the area with heavy lifting equipment? Vexen looked surprised by the question. Of course, we have salvage ships designed to recover damaged vessels. Why do you ask? Commander Lee, how long would it take your fastest rescue ships to reach the damaged vessel? At least 4 hours if we face no interference, but we would have to cross directly through Gornathi missile range. Jiwan nodded thoughtfully. War Chief, Vexen, how long would it take your salvage ships to reach the same location? Perhaps 2 hours. Our ships are closer to that sector. But why should we risk our people for Kalarian lives? Because, Jiwan said simply, your salvage ships are the only ones that can save them in time. Both commanders fell silent. The logic was clear but unthinkable. They were being asked to help their enemies. This is impossible, Commander Lee said finally. We cannot ask the Gornathi to risk their lives for our people. Nor should we, Vexen agreed. It makes no strategic sense. To save enemy personnel, Jiwan leaned forward in her chair. Let me ask you both something. War Chief Vexen, if Gornathi miners were trapped and dying, what would you expect your warriors to do? Save them, obviously. No Gornathi life is ever abandoned while rescue is possible. Commander Lee, what about Kalarian values? Would your people abandon crew members in danger? Never. We would risk everything to bring our people home safely. Then you both understand the value of life, Jiwan observed. You both believe that some things are more important than military advantage. She paused, letting that thought settle in their minds. The question is whether you believe that value applies only to your own species, or to all intelligent life. War Chief Vexen shifted uncomfortably. His warrior culture was built around protecting the strong, but it also had deep traditions about honor and courage. Commander Lee stared at his tactical displays. His people prized scientific knowledge and technological achievement, but they also valued the preservation of life and learning. If we help them, Vexen said slowly, they will still be our enemies tomorrow. Will they? Jiwan asked. The question hung in the air like a challenge. After a long pause, War Chief Vexen made his decision. Gornathi salvage vessels will move to assist the damaged ship, but any Kalarian attack on our rescue force will be met with total retaliation. Understood, Commander Lee replied immediately. All Kalarian vessels will power down weapons while Gornathi ships conduct the rescue operation. You have our word. What happened over the next 4 hours changed everything. Sergeant Yunbi Yun, monitoring communications from Earth's intelligence vessel, watched in amazement as the rescue operation unfolded. Gornathi salvage ships moved carefully toward the damaged Kalarian vessel, while maintaining constant communication with Kalarian technical specialists. The Kalarians are providing technical specifications to help the Gornathi safely attach to their ship's hull, she reported to Colonel Won-Ho Kim. They are sharing classified engineering data with their enemies. And the Gornathi, they are using their most advanced equipment and risking their best rescue specialists. War Chief Vexen sent his own son to lead the operation. The rescue was incredibly complex. The Kalarian ship was badly damaged and leaking atmosphere. The Gornathi had to carefully match the rotation of the drifting vessel while avoiding debris and unstable hull sections. But something unexpected began happening. Kalarian engineers started offering suggestions about how to improve the rescue operation. Gornathi specialists shared their own techniques for dealing with similar emergencies. Dr. Soyoung Han monitored the communication channels, fascinated by what she was hearing. Captain Kim, they are not just cooperating on the rescue, they are actually learning from each other. A Kalarian engineer named Jinwoo Park discovered that Gornathi hull-cutting tools were more precise than anything his people had developed. A Gornathi rescue specialist called Hexa found that Kalarian life support systems were far more efficient than her people's designs. When the rescue was finally completed, all 47 Kalarian crew members were safe. But the real miracle was, what happened next? Instead of immediately returning to their battle positions, both fleets remained in the rescue area. Engineers and medical specialists from both sides were exchanging information about equipment, techniques, and technologies. War Chief Vexen found himself talking directly with the rescued Kalarian mining supervisor, a woman named Myung Seo. She explained how the crystal extraction process worked and why precision was so important. "We have been doing this wrong," Vexen admitted to his officers. "We thought we could simply blast the crystals out with brute force. But this Kalarian shows me that careful extraction produces much higher quality materials." Meanwhile, Commander Lee was fascinated by the Gornathi salvage equipment. "Their tools are designed to last for centuries," he told his engineering staff. "Instead of building new equipment constantly, they perfect their designs over generations. Think of the resources we could save." As the immediate crisis ended, both commanders found themselves reluctant to resume hostilities. "Human diplomat," Commander Lee said during a three-way communication, "this rescue operation has given us much to think about." "Indeed," War Chief Vexen agreed. "Perhaps there are things we can learn from each other that do not require violence." Jiwan smiled. "Would you be willing to continue talking? Not as enemies planning the next battle, but as people trying to solve a common problem?" Both commanders looked at each other's images on their screens. For the first time in 37 cycles of warfare, they were not seeing monsters or obstacles to be destroyed. They were seeing individuals who had chosen to save lives when they could have chosen to ignore them. "We will talk," Commander Lee said finally. "Yes," Vexen agreed. "We will talk." Back on Earth, Admiral Hyunwoo Park watched the reports with growing amazement. "Lieutenant Minho, are you seeing this? They are actually negotiating instead of fighting." "How did Captain Kim do it, sir? She has no weapons, no threats, no way to force them to cooperate." Hyunwoo smiled. "She gave them something more powerful than threats, Lieutenant. She gave them a chance to be heroes instead of killers. And she showed them that their enemies were just people with different solutions to the same problems." The war was not over yet, but for the first time in decades, peace had become possible. Not through superior firepower or threats of destruction, but through the simple recognition that former enemies could choose to become something else entirely. Jiwan had proven that sometimes the most powerful weapon was simply asking people to be better than they thought they could be. News of the Kalarian-Gornathi cooperation spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Within 2 weeks of the rescue operation, Ambassador Ji-won Kim was receiving communication requests from dozens of other species locked in their own conflicts. The first came from the Zephyrian Empire, requesting human mediation in their dispute with their former slave species, the Nullos. The second arrived from the Tritonian Council, asking for help with their border war against the Hegemony Alliance. More requests followed every day. General Krex watched the flood of diplomatic communications with growing alarm. He called an emergency meeting of the Confederation High Council. "The humans are spreading their influence without firing a single shot," he announced to the assembled delegates. "Every conflict they resolve weakens our authority. If species can solve their disputes through cooperation instead of superior force, what need do they have for our guidance?" The other council members shifted uncomfortably. Their entire civilization was built on the concept that peace came through strength and fear. If the humans were right, then everything they believed was wrong. Jiwan found herself assigned to mediate the Zephyrian-Nulo conflict, one of the most challenging disputes in the galaxy. The Zephyrians had enslaved the Nulos 3 centuries ago and built their entire economy around free labor. The Nulos had recently achieved their independence through a bloody revolution, but tensions remained high. Captain Tae-hoon Song piloted the diplomatic vessel toward the neutral meeting station, established in space between the two territories. He reviewed the mission briefing with growing concern. "Captain Kim, this conflict is different from the mining dispute. The Zephyrians and Nulos hate each other with centuries of accumulated anger. The Zephyrians still think the Nulos are property. The Nulos want revenge for generations of suffering." Jiwan studied the cultural files about both species. The Zephyrians were tall, elegant beings who prized beauty and artistic achievement. They saw themselves as naturally superior to other species, and believed slavery was a form of charity that gave purpose to lesser beings. The Nulos were smaller, with gray skin and large eyes adapted for working in dark conditions. They were naturally gifted engineers and inventors, but the Zephyrians had suppressed their creativity for centuries, using them only for manual labor. What do we know about their current leadership? Jiwan asked. Lord Zeph Prime leads the Zephyrian delegation. He is from one of the oldest aristocratic families and owned thousands of Nullo slaves. He still refuses to accept that slavery has been abolished. And the Nullos? Their representative is Chief Engineer Kara 7. She spent 40 years as a slave in Zephyrian crystal mines before escaping to join the revolution. She has very good reasons to hate them. The meeting station was a sterile environment designed to prevent either side from gaining advantage. Separate docking bays kept the delegations apart until the formal negotiations began. Lord Zeph Prime arrived first, accompanied by a dozen advisors, wearing elaborate robes that sparkled with embedded jewels. He was nearly 3 meters tall, with pale golden skin that seemed to glow with inner light. Everything about him radiated wealth and privilege. Chief Engineer Kara 7 came with a much smaller group of technical specialists wearing simple work clothes. She was barely half the height of the Zephyrian lord, with calloused hands that showed decades of hard labor. Her large eyes held intelligence and determination that had survived centuries of oppression. The first meeting was a disaster. I refuse to negotiate with stolen property, Lord Zeph Prime announced as soon as he saw Kara 7. These creatures belong to my family by ancient right. They should be returned immediately. Property? Kara 7's voice was quiet but filled with controlled anger. We built your cities, mined your crystals, maintained your technology. For 300 years, we created everything you claim as your achievements, and you still call us property? You were given purpose and meaning through service, Lord Zeph Prime replied coldly. Without our guidance, you would still be primitive savages living in caves. The Nulo delegation started to stand up, ready to walk out. Jiwan raised her hand for attention. Lord Zeph Prime, I have read about Zephyrian achievements in art and architecture. Your people have created some of the most beautiful structures in the galaxy. Could you tell me about them? The question caught the Zephyrian lord off guard. He had been expecting threats or demands for concessions. Our achievements? Well, yes, we have built wonders that lesser species cannot even imagine. The crystal spires of Zeph Alpha reach kilometers into the sky. The Harmony Gardens produce music from wind and water that can heal the soul. For the next hour, Lord Zeph Prime described his people's artistic accomplishments with growing enthusiasm. Despite his arrogance, his genuine love for beauty and creativity was obvious. These sound magnificent, Jiwan said sincerely. Such projects must require incredible technical skill to build and maintain. Of course, the engineering challenges are enormous. The crystal spires alone required innovations in materials, science, structural dynamics, and environmental control that took decades to develop. Jiwan turned to Kara 7. Chief Engineer, you must have worked on some of these projects during your time in Zephyrian territory. Kara 7 nodded slowly. I helped build the foundation systems for the crystal spires. The underground support network was my design. Lord Zeph Prime stared at her in shock. Impossible. Those plans were created by our greatest architects. Your architects designed what people would see, Kara 7 replied calmly. But they had no idea how to make it actually work. Every major Zephyrian construction project was built on Nullo engineering, even if we were never allowed to take credit for it. The room fell silent. Lord Zeph Prime looked like someone had just told him that his entire world was built on lies. Dr. Junho An, monitoring the negotiations from Earth's diplomatic vessel, sent a message to Jiwan. Captain, you are breaking down their fundamental assumptions about their relationship. Be careful. This could make them more hostile instead of more cooperative. But Jiwan continued her approach. Over the next several days, she facilitated discussions about specific projects where Zephyrian vision had been combined with Nulo technical expertise. The pattern became impossible to ignore. The Harmony Gardens, Kara 7 explained during one session, were beautiful to look at. but they produced no sound until we designed the resonance chambers and water flow systems. The floating palace, added another Nulo engineer named Hexo-3, would have crashed into the ocean without our gravity manipulation technology. The Great Library, said a third, could store millions of artistic works only because we created the preservation and retrieval systems. Lord Zeph Prime listened to these revelations with growing amazement and discomfort. His entire understanding of Zephyrian superiority was crumbling before his eyes. "Why did you never tell us?" he asked, finally. "Why did you let us believe we had done this alone?" "Because," Kara-7 said quietly, "slaves who showed too much intelligence or creativity were often killed as potential troublemakers. We learned to hide our abilities to survive." The breakthrough came when G1 asked both sides to describe their vision for the future. Lord Zeph Prime spoke about creating even greater artistic achievements, buildings and gardens that would inspire people across the galaxy. But when pressed for details, he admitted that without Nolo technical support, most of his dreams were impossible. Kara-7 talked about using Nulo engineering skills to build new technologies and explore scientific frontiers. But she acknowledged that her people lacked the artistic vision and aesthetic sense that made Zephyrian culture so compelling. "It seems to me," G1 observed, "that both of your peoples have talents the other needs. The question is whether you can find a way to work together as equals instead of as masters and slaves." "Equals?" Lord Zeph Prime struggled with the concept. "But we are so different. They are small and gray and practical. We are tall and beautiful and creative." "Different does not mean unequal," G1 replied. "A musician and an instrument maker are different, but both are necessary to create music." Over the following weeks, something unprecedented began happening. Young Zephyrians started visiting Nulo engineering facilities, curious about how their great monuments actually worked. Nulo technicians toured Zephyrian art galleries, amazed by the creative achievements their own work had made possible. The first joint project was small, a fountain in a neutral space station that combined Zephyrian artistic design with Nulo technical innovation. Both species worked together as partners instead of masters and slaves. The result was more beautiful and more functional than anything either species had created alone. Lord Zeph Prime stood looking at the fountain for a long time. "I understand now," he said finally to Kara-7. "We were not your superiors. We were just different parts of the same creative process." "Yes," she replied. "And apart, we are both incomplete." Within months, the first joint Zephyrian Nulo research station was established. Former slaves and masters worked side by side as equals, combining artistic vision with technical expertise to create wonders neither could achieve alone. News of this success reached Earth, where Admiral Hunwoo Park watched the reports with amazement. "Sir," Lieutenant Minho Choi said, "Captain Kim has done it again. She took one of the most bitter conflicts in the galaxy and turned it into a partnership." "And without threatening anyone or using any kind of force," Hyunwoo mused. "She just helped them see that they needed each other more than they needed to be enemies." But not everyone was pleased with these developments. General Krex and the Confederation leadership watched with growing fear as more and more species began requesting human mediation instead of Confederation intervention. The galaxy was changing, and they were losing control. The emergency session of the Galactic Confederation High Council was the largest gathering of military leaders in over 2 centuries. Representatives from 43 species filled the war chamber, their weapons gleaming under harsh battle lighting. General Krex stood before a massive holographic display showing the current state of the galaxy. Large sections that had once been marked in red for active conflicts were now colored blue for peaceful cooperation. "Fellow warriors," his voice boomed through the translation systems, "we face the greatest threat our civilization has ever known. The humans are destroying everything we have built, and they are doing it without firing a single shot." Murmurs of agreement and concern filled the chamber. The assembled delegates had all built their power on the fundamental principle that strength came from superior weapons and the willingness to use them. General Krex activated the display, showing the recent changes. 6 major conflicts have been resolved in the past 3 months. The Kalarian-Gornathi War has ended with a mining cooperation agreement. The Zephyrian-Nulo dispute has resulted in joint research stations. The Tritonian border war was settled through resource-sharing treaties. He paused dramatically, letting the implications sink in. In every case, the humans succeeded where our most advanced weapons and strongest threats had failed. But worse than that, they are teaching other species that they do not need our protection. They no longer fear us, because they no longer need to fear each other. War Chief Brutax of the Omega Legion slammed his armored fist on his chair. This cannot be allowed to continue. If species can solve their own disputes, what purpose do we serve? How do we maintain order without the proper use of force? Admiral Vex Prime of the Star Destroyers activated her weapons display. The humans must be stopped before they spread their weakness further. I propose immediate military action against Earth. Other voices joined the call for war. For centuries, the Confederation had maintained peace through fear. They would intervene in conflicts, with overwhelming force, making it clear that resistance was futile. This system had worked perfectly until the humans arrived. General Krex raised his primary weapons for silence. I agree that action must be taken, but we must be careful. The humans have gained support from many species we used to control. Direct attack might unite our former subjects against us. Then what do you propose? Asked the Melanite delegate, her crystal weapons humming with anticipation. First, we issue an ultimatum. The humans must cease all diplomatic activities immediately and submit to Confederation oversight. If they refuse, we destroy their homeworld as an example to others. The vote was unanimous. Within hours, the ultimatum was transmitted to Earth. President Una Lim received the message in her office overlooking the Pacific Ocean. She read it twice before calling an emergency meeting of Earth's Defense Council. They are demanding that we stop all diplomatic activities and accept Confederation military supervision, she announced to the assembled leaders. If we refuse, they threaten to destroy Earth and everyone on it. Admiral Hyunwoo Park studied the sensor readings from the Confederation fleet massing at the edge of human space. Madam President, they have over 800 warships. Our entire defense force is less than 50 vessels. In a direct military confrontation, we cannot win. What about our allies? The species Ambassador Kim has helped? Unknown, Madam President. We have friendship agreements but no formal military treaties. We cannot know if anyone will risk their own people to defend us. President Lim stood at her window, looking out at the blue world that had given birth to humanity. Billions of people lived their lives below, unaware that their entire civilization might be destroyed within days. Contact Ambassador Kim. I want to know her assessment of the situation. Meanwhile, aboard the Confederation command station, Jiwon Kim found herself under heavy guard in what was essentially a prison cell. General Krex had ordered her detention the moment the ultimatum was issued. Human diplomat, he said as he entered her cell, his weapons fully powered and ready. Your species has 24 hours to submit to our authority. After that, your homeworld will be reduced to radioactive debris. Jiwon sat calmly at the small table, showing no sign of fear despite being surrounded by enough firepower to level a city. General, do you really think that threatening to kill billions of innocent people will make the galaxy a safer place? Safe? Krex laughed, a sound like grinding metal. The galaxy was safe when everyone understood that we had the power to destroy anyone who challenged the natural order. Your people have disrupted that understanding. You have made other species think they can solve their problems without proper supervision, and that frightens you. It was not a question. Krex's translator crackled with static as he struggled to respond. We are not frightened of anything. We have the most powerful weapons in the galaxy. Then why are you so desperate? To stop people from talking to each other? The question hung in the air like an accusation. General Krex had spent his entire life believing that power came from the ability to destroy enemies. The idea that real strength might come from the ability to turn enemies into friends was incomprehensible to him. Because, he said finally, without conflict, without the need for superior force, there is no natural hierarchy, no order, no way to determine who is worthy to lead and who should follow. Maybe, Jiwon suggested gently, Leadership should not be about forcing others to follow. Maybe it should be about inspiring others to choose to follow. Impossible. Choice leads to chaos. Only fear maintains proper discipline. Jiwan smiled sadly. General, what do you think will happen when you destroy Earth? The galaxy will see. What happens to those who challenge our authority? Order will be restored. Will it? Or will you just prove to every species in the galaxy that the Confederation is exactly what they should fear most? A collection of bullies who destroy anyone who dares to suggest a better way? For the first time in their conversation, General Krex hesitated. He had not considered how other species might react to the deliberate destruction of an entire world. They will understand that resistance is futile, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Some will. Jiwan agreed. They will submit to your rule out of terror, but others will remember that Earth tried to teach them cooperation instead of conquest. They will remember that humans chose to help instead of harm. And they will ask themselves whether they want to live in a galaxy ruled by fear or one guided by hope. General Krex turned away, unwilling to meet her steady gaze. Hope is a luxury for the weak. The strong make their own destiny through superior firepower. Is that what you really believe, General? Or is that just what you have been taught to believe? Before Krex could respond, an urgent communication came through his personal communicator. One of his subordinates was requesting immediate contact. General, the voice crackled with excitement. Our advanced scouts report unusual activity in multiple sectors. Several species are mobilizing their fleets, but they are not moving toward defensive positions. Explain. Sir, they appear to be moving toward Earth. General Krex felt a chill run through his armored body. Are they planning to attack the human homeworld before we do? Unknown, sir. But the fleets include Kalarian, Gornathi, Zephyrian, and Nulo vessels. They are traveling together instead of separately. Together? Krex's translator struggled with his confusion. Impossible. Those species were enemies until recently. Jiwan listened to the conversation with growing hope. She had not known if any of the species Earth had helped would be willing to risk themselves for humanity, but apparently some had made that choice. General, she said quietly, you wanted to know what real strength looks like. You are about to find out. Within 12 hours, the situation became clear. Fleet after fleet was arriving at the edge of human space not to attack Earth but to defend it. The Kalarians and Gornati came first, their former enemies now flying in perfect formation together. The Zephyrians arrived next, their elegant vessels, accompanied by smaller Nolo ships that provided technical support and advanced weaponry. The Tritonian Council brought their entire border patrol, leaving their own territory temporarily undefended. More ships kept coming. Species that had been locked in bitter conflicts for decades were now standing together to protect the world that had taught them peace was possible. On Earth, Admiral Hyunwoo Park watched the tactical displays with amazement. Madam President, we now have over 600 Allied vessels in defensive positions around our solar system. They came without being asked. They came because they chose to. President Yuna Lim felt tears forming in HFY. The moment General Krex powered down his weapons, something unprecedented happened across the galaxy. Species that had never communicated before began reaching out to each other. The news of the standoff at Earth spread faster than light speed. Communication, carried by trading vessels, diplomatic couriers, and word of mouth. Captain Ji-hee Kung, commanding Earth's orbital defense platform, watched her sensors with growing amazement. Admiral Park, we now have over 1,000 ships in defensive formation around Earth. The latest arrivals include species I have never heard of. Admiral Hyunwoo Park studied the tactical display showing the massive fleet that had gathered to protect humanity. Lieutenant Minho, can you identify all these vessels? Some of them, sir. But there are ships here from the far rim territories, independent colonies and nomadic fleets that rarely interact with galactic civilization. Somehow word has reached everyone. On the Confederation command station, General Krex faced the most difficult moment of his long military career. His entire worldview was crumbling around him as he watched former enemies working together with perfect coordination. General, his communications officer reported. "We are receiving transmission requests from the Allied fleet. They want to speak with you directly." "Put them through," Krex said quietly. The main communication screen activated, showing dozens of different species commanders arranged in a grid pattern. Each represented a different world, a different culture, a different approach to civilization. But they all spoke with one voice. Commander Deho Lee of the Calarians spoke first. "General Krex, we know what you are thinking. You believe this. Alliance cannot last because we are too different, too divided by old conflicts and natural competition." War Chief Vexen nodded in agreement. "You think that without fear to unite us, we will return to fighting each other for resources and territory." Chief Engineer Kara 7 added her voice. "You cannot understand how former slaves and masters can work side by side as equals." Other commanders continued the message, each representing a different success story of human diplomacy. "But you are wrong about us," they said in unison. "We are not here because humans forced us to come. We are here because they showed us something we had never imagined was possible." General Krex listened in fascination as each commander explained their transformation. The Calarians and Gornathi described how cooperation had made their mining operations more efficient and profitable than war ever had. The Zephyrians and Nulos talked about artistic and technical achievements that neither species could have accomplished alone. "The humans did not defeat us," War Chief Vexen explained. "They did not threaten us or bribe us or trick us into cooperation. They simply asked us one question: what if there was a better way? And when we discovered that there was, Commander," Lee continued, "we realized that the old way of solving problems through violence was not just wrong, it was wasteful, destructive, and ultimately pointless." Jiwon Kim, now free to move around the Confederation station, stood beside General Krex. As they listened to the testimonies, she watched his expression change from confusion to understanding, to something that might have been hope. "Your weapon," he said finally to Jiwon, "is not superior technology or hidden military strength." "No," she agreed. "It is trust." Jiwon shook her head gently. "Trust is important, but it is not our weapon." General Krex looked confused again. "Then what is it? How did you accomplish what our most advanced weapons could not?" Jiwon smiled as she gestured toward the communication screen showing the massive Allied fleet. "Our weapon is hope, General. The hope that different beings can choose to work together instead of tearing each other apart." She paused, watching his four eyes as understanding began to dawn. Every species in that fleet made the same discovery. They realized that they had been so focused on protecting themselves from their enemies that they never considered the possibility of turning those enemies into friends. "But how?" Krex asked desperately. "How do you change centuries of hatred and fear?" "You start small," Jiwon explained. "You find one thing that enemies have in common, one shared value or mutual need. Then you build from there. One conversation at a time, one act of cooperation at a time, one moment of understanding at a time." She gestured toward the screen again. "Every ship out there represents someone who decided that cooperation was stronger than conquest. They did not make that choice because they were forced to. They made it because they were given the opportunity to see that a better future was possible." Over the next several hours, something remarkable happened throughout the Confederation fleet. Individual commanders began requesting private communications with their counterparts in the Allied fleet. Many of them had been fighting against these same species for decades, but now they were curious about this new approach to conflict resolution. Captain Suyong Nam, monitoring communications from Earth's intelligence vessel, reported to her superiors. "Admiral, we are detecting thousands of private communications between Confederation and Allied vessels. They are not negotiating surrender terms. They are asking questions about how cooperation actually works." Dr. Junho An, studying the psychological profiles of the Confederation leadership, made an important observation. These are career military officers who have spent their entire lives believing that might makes right. But they are also intelligent, beings who can recognize when their fundamental assumptions are proven wrong. The breakthrough came when General Krex made a personal request to speak with War Chief Vexen. The two military leaders had fought against each other in several campaigns over the years, developing a grudging mutual respect even as enemies. "Vexen," Krex said during their private communication, "I need to understand something. Your people are warriors. You were born to fight and conquer. How did you give up everything that made you strong?" Vexen's image on the screen showed the massive Gornathi commander in a moment of rare vulnerability. "That is where you are wrong, old enemy. We did not give up our strength. We discovered what real strength actually looks like." "Explain." "For centuries we measured strength by how much we could destroy, how many enemies we could kill, how many worlds we could conquer, how much fear we could inspire. But the humans showed us a different way to measure strength." Vexen paused, choosing his words carefully. "Real strength is not about how much you can force others to do. Real strength is about how much you can inspire others to choose to do. The humans are the strongest species I have ever encountered, and they have never threatened anyone." General Krex processed this information slowly. Everything in his training and experience told him it was impossible, but the evidence was overwhelming. The humans had achieved more in months than the Confederation had accomplished in centuries, and they had done it without firing a single shot. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now," Ji-won Kim said, joining the conversation, "you have the same choice everyone else has had. You can continue trying to rule through fear and superior firepower, or you can learn to lead through inspiration and cooperation. And if we choose the old way, then you will discover that fear only works as long as people believe they have no alternative." Today, the galaxy learned that alternatives exist. The final decision came not from General Krex or the Confederation, High Council, but from individual ship commanders throughout the fleet. One by one, Confederation vessels began powering down their weapons and requesting permission to open diplomatic communications with the Allied fleet. Within hours, the Great Standoff became the greatest diplomatic gathering in galactic history. Former enemies were sharing technical specifications, cultural exchanges, and resource-sharing agreements. President Yuna Lim, watching from Earth, made a historic announcement to her people and the galaxy. Today marks the beginning of a new era, not because one side defeated another in battle, but because people from hundreds of different worlds chose to build something better together. The Galactic Confederation dissolved peacefully within a year, replaced by the Cooperative Council, where disputes were resolved through human-trained mediators rather than superior firepower. The new government had no military forces because it had no enemies to fight. General Krex retired from military service and became one of the first alien students at Earth's new diplomatic academy. When asked why he had given up his weapons and his authority, his answer was simple. "I learned that the strongest weapon any civilization can possess is not the power to destroy, but the wisdom to understand that everyone, no matter how different, shares common hopes and fears." Ji-won Kim was appointed as the first Galactic Mediator General, a position created to formalize humanity's unique approach to conflict resolution. Earth, the planet with no natural weapons and no military traditions, became the diplomatic center of the galaxy. The transformation was not instant or easy. Old hatreds took time to heal, and some conflicts required years of patient mediation, but for the first time in galactic history, war became the exception rather than the rule. Trade routes flourished where battlefields once scarred space. Mixed-species colonies thrived where segregated territories once stood guard. Scientific cooperation accelerated progress that had been impossible when every species worked in isolation. And whenever new species asked about humanity's lack of military ceremony, the answer remained the same. "We do not need weapons," they were told. "We have something better." Years later, Ambassador Ji-won Kim stood in the rebuilt council chambers, training a new generation of human diplomats. The room was filled with beings from dozens of species, all learning the principles of peaceful conflict resolution. "Remember," she told her students, "the goal is never to win an argument or force someone to agree with you. The goal is to help everyone involved discover that their real interests are not as different as they first appeared. A young human diplomat raised her hand. Ambassador Kim, what if they refuse to listen? What if they only understand force? Jiwan smiled, remembering her first encounter with General Krex. Everyone understands force, Cadet Minji. But force only tells people what they cannot do. Hope shows them what they can accomplish. And in the end, hope is always stronger than fear because it offers people a choice instead of a threat. The galaxy had learned that humanity's greatest export was not technology or military might, but the revolutionary concept that strength lies not in what you can force others to do, but in what you can inspire them to choose. In the end, the question was never about weapons at all. It was about whether intelligent beings could choose cooperation over competition, understanding over hatred, and hope over fear. The answer, it turned out, was yes. They just needed someone to show them how.